Hi, everybody. AI has a key role in driving the new normal. I'm welcoming you all from over 70 countries, and I'm very happy that we have again so many people all over the globe sharing their experience and contributing to the AI community and making sure that we're using the benefit of technology to put it down to business. First and foremost, I would like to thank our co-host, EPAM Systems, to make this happen with us. All those organizations has exploited AI fast. This powerful technology will very soon become the new normal, resulting is gaining a competitive edge by efficiency and quality. With that, I would like to open our 5th virtual AI conference with with 20 speakers taking us through with their experience in keynotes and panels. Now it's my great honor to welcome our first speaker and representative of EPAM Systems, our co-host, Balazs Fejes, serves as an executive president and co-head of the global business of EPAM Systems. In his role, he oversees the strategy and operations of EPAM's global business with focus on Europe, APAC, and the financial services. Now the stage is yours. Thanks a lot.
Much. Good afternoon. It's good to be here. Actually, probably it's good to be in my home talking to you via video, which is probably it's quite helpful and makes it quite flexible to do this. So my name is Balazs Fejes, but with the exception of my mom, my wife, and my son, everybody just calls me FB because, you know, pronouncing Hungarian names are difficult for humans, and probably it's quite challenging for AIs too. I'm the co-head for business in EPAM. EPAM is a global product development, digital platform engineering, and digital and product design agency. And I'm responsible for EU, APAC, and financial services globally. In the last 20 years or so, AI was a hyped, maybe a little bit overhyped concept. Always in the future, always being very sophisticated, futuristic, which always represented the cutting edge. And somehow, most of us anticipated that this is a bubble. And this bubble will burst, maybe the two AI winters ingrained this outcome into our global collective. AI winters were the two periods, actually, since in the 50s, when people lost their trust or they trust that it will generate any kind of outcome, and they removed funding. People in this case representing more like businesses and more like governments and the scientific community. Since the 90s, we are experiencing a growth and renewed investment into AI. But if you start looking into AI, you quickly realize that it's not one thing, but many different capabilities, each with a different level of maturity. So some of the analyst firms are publishing these maturity curves, and you might be familiar with how they go and how they actually mature over time. Some of these capabilities, AI capabilities, are early in the hype cycle. Some already reaching the productivity plateau itself. The AI of the movies, the sci-fi books, something which I'm looking forward to meet and have a conversation, is the so-called artificial general intelligence, or a strong AI. That one is stuck quite early in the cycle, always predicted to be 20, 40 years out. Resembling kind of another anticipated technology marvel, the fusion energy generation, which promises free energy without any kind of environment impact. We, of course, learned from the movies that if you ever develop a AI with human level or superhuman level artificial intelligence or intelligence, that will end the human race. And imagine if that AI would have access to fusion technology too. In that case, they don't need us even for batteries. What's batteries, right? So let me focus on things which are not on track to use humans as batteries. And as I'm an eternal optimist, I'm looking forward to see more AI-derived technology embedded into our daily lives. You see, by this point, the once cutting-edge AI application has been adapted, integrated into thousands and millions of applications, deeply embedded into many industries, but they no longer called AI anymore. Once something becomes common enough, useful enough, we stop labeling, calling it AI, because we're using AI for the cutting edge, this expression. So let me try to reverse this statement. If something is not yet useful, if something is not yet common, or potentially you still think it's scary, you call it AI, which is quite bizarre, right? Let's admit that. We open our phone with our face, talk to our car, to a phone, right? Talk to a speaker to ask about the weather or to turn down the lights. Translate documents from one language to another, or carry out complete conversations in a different language which we don't speak with a taxi driver in China, but we don't call these things AI anymore. Although all these capabilities have been developed, accomplished, as part of a quest to build a scary thing, the human level artificial intelligence. I really don't envy AI researchers. Once they deliver a breakthrough, once they make something useful, they try to explain to you what they do, let's say on a family meeting, we say to them, that's not AI, that's NLP, or that's speech recognition, or computer vision, which could be quite frustrating for them, right? At this point of time, we are entering a new era of computer revolution, a new age which is built on the foundation of what we used to call, and what today we're calling AI, or large-scale machine learning models, which are growing exponentially. This is all very much based on the current changes and current explosion of cloud-based technologies. If you measure the scaling of these new large-scale models in terms of number of parameters, which roughly represents the connection points in a model, a connection point is really translates how accurate the model is and how well it recognizes things. You will find that in the last 12 months, the largest model has grown 17 times, outstripping the growth of the, let's say, even the Moore's law. Internet data, web, and the cloud with AI-optimized processors and new interconnects are clearly fueling this growth, along with huge advances of once cutting-edge computer science. These concepts are, which you might hear these days, are self-supervised learning and transfer learning. Self-supervised learning removes the human element from the learning or the teaching process. You see, at this point of time, in the past, in order to train a neural net, you need to utilize data, a data set which had to be created by manual process. So you were limited by how many hours or how many people you can deploy on this task. But now the training is done by bots. The data is being labeled automatically, which means that you can make the training process, the training data preparation, a highly scalable process where you are only limited by the computer power you assign to the task. So use these bots on the cloud to take data on the web, to create new data sets. And it could be the data sets, new language, learn a new language based on what's on the web, learn about image recognition because we upload all that photos, all about programming languages because all the open source projects are public and you can use it for training AIs on that data sets. All the data we generated, uploaded, curated over the human history serves as an input for training data sets. Aren't you happy that you uploaded and created all those cat videos? Because now you can be sure that AIs can recognize cats. I think it's pretty useful. Transfer learning solves another problem. Transfer learning solves the problem that in the past, machine learning models were designed to accomplish a single task. But we humans do use our past experiences not just to accomplish the same task, but to apply it to the same problems too. Transfer learning allows us to reuse a model, makes it possible to start not from scratch all the time and actually boost our learning on similar tasks. But we have to be honest and admit that all these models rely on large data sets. So if you are an organization who had trouble in the past to collect large data sets, or the data sets are not really representing the realities which you are living in, so you trained your models utilizing a data set and the reality shifted, then your models will going to create not too accurate predictions. Now, why is that interesting? It's interesting because in the last couple of months, I think our realities have shifted. A lot of things have changed. So some of the models, what we used during the pandemic, are generated incorrect outcomes because they were trained on data sets which were captured or taken prior to the pandemic itself. This actually represents one big problem of the current models, which is or learning application is very much brittle in a certain way. But we have to be, in the recent years, technology companies just made the AI or machine learning applications available. So in the past, they were only made available the machine learning platforms, but now they're starting to make it available to programmers, to mere human beings. So you don't need to be a data scientist and AI researchers to do it, but the models too. Right? Available via APIs, so you can build new types of application or enhance the existing models to make it specific to an industry or an enterprise itself. And it comes around, it actually solves the problem, which I mentioned a little bit before, is that how difficult for large models to be built by small and medium-sized enterprises, because these large organizations will take time and you can reuse these models to build your own derivative out of it. This will enable us to build new types of applications which are going to really help us, right? You see, the PC and mobile phone, the web, didn't become such an explosive, transformative change agents. They became to that, not because of the underlying technology, because of the CPU, because of the data, this TCP/IP or HTML. They become that because we build all that applications, all that layers of applications on top of it using this technology. Because different application delivered on those platforms, connecting people, delivering content, and creating certain services. These solutions will remove mundane daily tasks across all fields, increase our effectiveness in daily life. From translation, programming, accounting, counting of things, all the way of interpreting documents or answer our emails, mostly helping us, lowly human beings, in mundane tasks. And I think we go back to the question, really what was posed in the name of this session, right? So let's try to go back to the original question and answer that, right? Is it idle or mainstream? I definitely vote for mainstream, but probably we will not call it AI because we will find it extremely useful, common, and it will be everywhere and definitely not scary. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for all these insights. One thing that I would really like to thank you for, this is what we as Swiss Cognitive always trying also to emphasize. We rather talk about cognitive technologies than about AI, because for the time being, there is definitely nothing about magic. And what we really want to is to benefit about this cognitive technology and turn it into real business and make it especially trustful trustworthy, and to support the humankind in whatever we do. Now, we do have some questions for you. I'm going to read it to you.
All right.
What do you think about using AI for peace, education, to prevent and decrease violence in home, country, region, planet, and the universe?
Wow, that's a wide one. Okay, that's a very broad spectrum, right? So I don't know about violence. I think that's violence is typically coming from a misunderstanding, right? I do believe that some of these capabilities could be used to better understand each other and better help each other. That's really coming out of if you're bringing people together. Clearly, you're going to be less violent if it can translate the right languages and the sentences, this simplifying communication. I find it AI or cognitive technology is very useful in education, bringing the right subjects or things like the right answers to it, interacting with it, helping potentially kids or even adults through the task, because some of the things can be replaced. So you can ask questions to a database and you can ask questions with a natural language queries, and it will answer and helps you to really consume and actually understand a certain subject domain, helps you to actually dive into it, understand how to explore it, right? Points to the right direction. So I see very strongly that the teaching and education can benefit, not necessarily by replacing teachers with robots, but so much about actually interacting with an interacting way with a lexicon, with an encyclopedia, which is going to answer you questions and you don't have to look it up, which makes it very easy and very convenient to gain knowledge. And I do believe that if you gain more knowledge, that will help everybody, right? Even it can bring more peace.
Thanks a lot. There are some others. I'm going to pick some of them because we don't have that much time. How do you machine learning models evaluation with the government needs to control decision outcomes or regulators in banking asking for justification in the outcome of the logic?
Now that's a really, really difficult subject, right? The difficulty is coming from, first of all, how you're making the decisions. So we see an example where it's actually not in the financial service or regulated industries, but much more in the automotive, where neural nets or machine learning can be applied, but they're applying it with two models running at the same time and only accepting it if both machine learning models are actually producing the same results or producing close correlations between those. And they have to use different techniques, different ways of building that models, and that's when it's accepted. I think the problem what we are seeing is that some of the benefits of these machine learning models are diminishing as you apply more and more privacy, because you are going to limit the data set which you can learn on, which I think going to be a little bit of a challenge applying some of these capabilities in Europe, especially in the FS industry.
Thanks a lot. Honestly, we have quite some other questions. I would suggest that you guys will ask directly. Either you get into the virtual backstage and have another discussion, or you can also have a one-to-one. It's up to you using what we can provide. So thanks a lot for being with us and sharing these insights. We do very much appreciate. And now it's my great honor actually to introduce to your colleague, Jonathan Wilkes, who is actually sitting in New Zealand. So hi, Jonathan from New Zealand. Jonathan has a vast experience in architecting gamification across mobile and web application for government, food and beverage, healthcare, and life science. Today, he supports EPAM Global Products Delivery Practice with a focus on insight, engineering, development, and explaining machine learning, AI, and NLP capabilities. There is a nice quote that you sent me, Jonathan, and I will also read this to the audience. I never expected a passion for online gaming, creating and managing digital communities to become a meaningful career. However, this created a useful skill set early on, coordinating large teams and creating useful, accessible content. I continue to enjoy, especially in today's climate, working in the heart of the ever-evolving digital space, delivering leading-edge IT solutions and cross-global audience. So now I'm keen to hear more about you. Just a second. Oh, I'm sorry. Somehow I missed, I have the agenda in an analog, and obviously it's not the last update, so I'm sorry. So now I'll be more than happy to introduce you to our next two speakers, who are actually Susanne Tron, and she started her career at Microsoft and Roche Diagnostic, where she was responsible for the modeling and the linguistic resources of development of IT products and business applications. Since 2015, she has been working in Swiss Re as a knowledge engineer and natural language understanding specialist, focusing on the development of AI solutions, supporting decision-making process for reinsurance contracts and claims. Susanne holds a master's degree in computational linguistics from the University of Zurich in Switzerland. With her on stage, Domingo de Garcia, he is managing director at Expert Systems in Switzerland. Domingo has more than 20 years of experience in several executive roles in various companies and agencies in the finance, technology, consulting, and intelligence sectors. In 2016, he co-founded Achetan, a Swiss AI company with an international presence in Argentina, Colombia, Spain, and Germany, with the aim of serving human wisdom with AI. What is special about Domingo is that he speaks 7 languages, so no wonder that his passion is about natural language processing. So now the stage is yours.
Thanks, Dalit, for the introduction. I'm going to share with you my screen. I hope you can see it. As said, thanks Swiss Cognitive for having given us, Swiss Re and Expert System, the chance of talking about artificial intelligence in these pandemic times. In these 15 minutes that we have been allocated, Susanna and I would like to talk to you about how artificial intelligence is much more needed than ever to boost digitalization, process automation, and we'll briefly explain how Swiss Re has embedded artificial intelligence, in this particular case, natural language processing and natural language understanding, inside the core of its business operations. Let me, I think we can skip these slides. So in 1943, the American neurophysiologist of the University of Illinois at Chicago, Warren McCulloch, And the cognitive psychologist Walter Pitt published the paper A Logical Calculus of the Ideas Imminent in Nervous Activities, describing the McCulloch-Pitts neuron, the first mathematical model of a neural network built on the ideas developed by Alan Turing in his work on computable numbers. That was close to 80 years ago. At this point, if we were gathered in a room, I would ask you just two simple questions. What is the budget in your companies allocated to develop and implement artificial intelligence? A couple of million, 1 million, 500,000, 1,000? And how big is that budget in comparison to, let's say, the budget allocated to marketing and communications, or even to HR? My point is the following. As mentioned before, the primeval neuron was modeled 80 years ago. And still, machine learning and deep learning, two of the trendiest disciplines in artificial intelligence in the last years, keep on being cloistered in the R&D departments or in the not so much disturbing proof of concept realm of most corporations nowadays worldwide. According to Gartner, just around 30%, 30, of the artificial intelligence models developed reach the level of production. So that is to say, artificial intelligence is a technological approach extremely undervalued. So it's high time to turn the tide. But why does artificial intelligence keep on being a buzzword and not a solid corporate reality? I would say mainly for three reasons: resistance to change, lack of tools and profiles, and also lack of explainable and practical artificial intelligence. Resistance to change, and I think human beings are, well, they never like being taken outside their comfort zone. And if on top of that, we add apocalyptic messages such as artificial intelligence is going to leave millions of human beings unemployed, then we have the perfect storm. Please, let's try to be reasonable. Indeed, there are some tasks which can be perfectly and even much better performed by artificial intelligence models than by human beings. But that's a natural evolvement in the technological improvement of our lives. But those jobs taken by artificial intelligence models will be, so to say, replaced by new jobs, new skills, new competencies. The same thing that nowadays there are no wheelwrights and there are a lot of motor engineers. In the future, we'll have new profiles, professions that we cannot even imagine right now. Concerning the lack of tools and profiles, this second item is closely related to the first one. The lack of profiles and the lack of tools are two crucial reasons for this infinite implementation. Concerning the lack of profiles, just to give you an idea, to implement or to develop a natural language processing or natural language understanding platform with a solid performance, somehow using a hybrid approach, blending the mathematical statistical approach and the symbolic approach, we have the need of a professional with knowledge about programming, mathematics, statistics, and linguistics as well. We can go even one level higher, because the latter is a pure operational profile. But if we are thinking on a strategic profile, on top of the programming, mathematical, statistical, and linguistic knowledge, we need a professional with a business understanding, or at least the comprehension of a particular market niche. The efforts to combat the shortage of these profiles involve a serious bet on education, not only on university education, but also primary education. And regarding the lack of tools, They are needed to ease putting into production these artificial intelligence models. Putting into production extends to ongoing review and adjustment of models to ensure their relevancy over time as the business and its objectives change. Last but not least, the lack of explainable and practical artificial intelligence. I think explainable or practical artificial intelligence means a set of capabilities that describes a model, highlights its strengths and weaknesses, and predicts its likely behavior and identifies any potential biases. Accountability, stability, transparency in algorithmic decision making, so to say. Privacy, security, algorithmic transparency, and digital ethics may demand different levels of requirements for explainability. For example, artificial intelligence that makes decisions about people, such as rejecting a loan application, may require explainability. By law, providers of algorithms must give the user a reason for their rejection. Artificial intelligence that makes decisions in a closed loop with important consequences, such as autonomous driving, also has a high need of explainability due to ethical and possibly legal reasons. According to DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency in the States, explainable artificial intelligence will emerge in transportation, security, medicine, finance, legal, and military applications. Nonetheless, and despite all these challenges we have in front of us concerning the implementation of artificial intelligence, there are corporations such as Swiss Re, which have embedded artificial intelligence in its core business operation. Now, I will let the floor to Susanna in order to explain the Swiss Re success story. Susanna?
Thank you, Domingo. So hi, everyone. I would like to give a very short view on the journey that Swiss Re has embarked on with Expert System a few years ago. So as some of you might know, the insurance and reinsurance business is highly document centric. So we have a lot of documents in many formats with various content, ranging from the submission documents at the start of an underwriting process, over to the contracts to seal the deal, over to the claims when something happens. So all our business are tightly related to processes around documents. So we started the journey already many years ago, where we started, of course, with simple things. However, we came soon to realize that there are also a lot of business processes that are so complex in their core that we need more than simple keyword search, for instance, or simple document classification. This is how we started to partner up with Expert System. We had a few very complex business cases around, again, document analytics, document processing, for instance, in the area of claims handling or contract reviewing. And this is where we came to realize we need a more advanced type of AI that Expert System can provide with their platform Cogito, where, for instance, in the area of claims handling, we're able to do more context-dependent information extraction, and this allowed us to accelerate our claims handling processes and to allow our business experts to spend less time with looking for information and more time with actually analyzing the information. In the contracts review process, it's similar. However, we even went beyond simple information extraction. So here we need artificial intelligence to really understand the content, to also maybe identify problematic areas in documents, in a contract in this case, in order to enhance our reviewing processes. So thanks to artificial intelligence here, we are happy that nowadays we have more than 5 projects running in production, one of which is for the contract reviewing, where we also have implemented the powerful toxic word flagging system. So we are able to point our users at problematic areas in the text. Why I am focusing more on this aspect is because, of course, in this context of pandemics, now we also are facing a new challenge. So we need to analyze our contracts again for a new type of threat. And this is again where we're happy to be able to partner with an AI company such as Expert System, where together, thanks to the experience we gained in the last years, we will now try to tackle the challenge of analyzing our contracts for pandemic-related risks. So this is all from my side. I'm not sure we have more time for questions.
Thanks a lot.
Let's finish. Yeah, let's finish with this slide. I think thanks Susanna for having explained to us this Swiss Re approach. So, what is the current situation we are facing? If we could transform the challenge into a mathematical formula, we might write something as you can see in this slide. A process automation and digitalization are key components in our model, which can be spectacularly boosted or raised by the use of artificial intelligence. Nonetheless, we cannot forget a heavy divisor, the pandemic, which is going to be with us for a long time. Digitalization, process automation, artificial intelligence, they must cease to be buzzwords, and they must become solid realities in our corporations, such as it has happened in Swiss Re. In this way, we will manage our dividend to be bigger than our divisor. And as a consequence, the positive result will be the recovery of our national economies. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. And we will also share this with the handouts so you can download it then also later. So I would like to share with you one question and then we have to go on. There will be a major change in the social and job economy. So do we have a visibility in which domains will there be demand? In a nutshell, what kind will the AI create? So if you can give us a short and crispy answer.
What domain would be the most, the trendiest one for the future inside artificial intelligence? I would say that mainly natural language processing, because language is the way how we communicate human beings. So we have to deal with that problem. We have to teach artificial intelligence models to talk, to understand our language.
Okay, thanks a lot. Now I would like to come to our next speakers, the panelists. And I will introduce all of them so they can actually focus on the content. I'm going to start with our moderator, with Pascal Roth, who is from our co-host, EPAM Systems. Pascal has an engineer in computer science and management consultants from the ETH in Zurich, with an international career in banking and insurance, mostly acting as a change agent to deploy novel platforms and penetrate new markets. Today, he works with his clients to advise on the transformation required to business and operating models towards the genuine 4.0 economy. In doing so, Pascal strives to make best use of technology and of AI, in particular to manage risks, streamline processes, and assist individuals in their daily activities. Pascal will lead the panel. With our panelists, I would like to start with Massimo Rigodanza. He is from Johnson & Johnson. Massimo is a result-driven global senior technology executive with global experience across the supply chain and processes, in the fast-moving consumer goods, pharmaceutical, and medical device industries. He has track record of business impact amplified by transforming traditional IT organizations into digital product teams with focus on speed, agility, and cost. Massimo is currently heading business technology for the supply chain pharma business of Johnson & Johnson worldwide, and he's involved in several initiatives around startup mentoring and coaching of emerging leaders. Thanks for being with us. Our next panelist is Afke Schouten. She studied mathematics at the University of Leiden and econometrics and management science at the Erasmus School of Economics. As a management consultant and senior data scientist, she has led various AI projects and set up AI organizations, international and Swiss companies. She's currently developing her own business in AI management and is the director of studies for AI management at the HWZ University of Applied Science in Switzerland. It is her mission is to help organizations generate true business value with AI and support organizations in creating an environment in which data scientists can thrive. Welcome, Afke, and thanks for being with us. Last but not least, our panelist, Thierry Buchelo, is running the innovation strategy and operation teams for Oracle in MEA and JPAC. He builds on experience at the interface of business and IT in several sectors and industries. He was an engagement manager at McKinsey & Company in Europe, North America, and Africa, and a visiting researcher at NEC Tokyo. Prior, he worked for two Swiss banks in the IT and strategy department. He holds a PhD in computer science and AI from the University of Zurich and a Master of Science in Computer Science from the ETH. In his spare time, he spends as much time as possible with his family and outdoor, or he's programming web and ML applications. So you see, you have a very diverse and a panel with a lot of experience. Pascal and the panelists, the virtual stage is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Dalit. Dear colleagues on the panel, on the conference. In his opening keynote speech, FB has mentioned several examples of AI who are applied and have become commodity in our lives. He mentioned also how the pandemic has affected data sets primarily, shaping a new normal. And I think we're going to talk about exactly that in the panel. He also mentioned the fact that AI has been a kind of overhyped. It has been out there for a while, a little bit like a science fiction topic. And so it runs the risk of us being at the start of an AI winter, in a way, if this indeed became commodity. So the first question to the panel would be, what needs to happen for us to face an AI spring rather than an AI winter? Maybe Afke.
Thanks, Pascal. I mean, right, first, the question I would ask, what is an AI winter? Or it's a time of dilution. And when we look at the previous winters that we've had in the 60s, the reason for it was we had limited computing power. And in the 90s now, there was a failure to achieve scale. These problems we have solved, right? So for me, the question is, what has the potential to bring us into a next winter? And from my perspective, this is the ability to embed such productive systems into an existing environment, not just from a technical perspective, but I guess also from a people and process perspective. And the way I see it is that it is key that the topic of AI in different companies will start to span wider than the data science team. And I hope to see that many non-technical roles will start to emerge, just like they have on the IT side in the past 30 years.
Makes a lot of sense. Thanks. Thierry, what about you?
I think there's a lot of convenience in hype. And as FP said earlier, once something becomes useful enough, you stop calling it by the name, right? And I think that's a little bit of the challenge we have in AI today. There's a lot of definitions. Some of them are very useful. And the winter might be over when people or decision makers have the confidence to actually call things by their real name. Actually think about where is it they add the value to their business model or whatever their organization is after. And once we reach that point and we don't hide behind two letters, I think that's going to be a big one for AI to come back and show how useful it can be in many applications.
Indeed. Do you want to add to that, Massimo?
Yeah, so I think there is really a tremendous opportunity. You said it at the beginning, Pascal, to really turn this potentially AI winter into an AI spring. Okay, I do really believe that. So I do believe actually that this crisis can help us to somehow create the end of the beginning for AI. And I think, what does it take to break it through? Because that's really the key question. Now, I think if we look at the numbers of AI projects, I think that 70% of the AI projects do not go beyond the prototype level. Why? Because AI experts, technology people in an organizational functions, business people cannot engage in a productive dialogue. So what does it take? I think in order to drive an AI spring, in order to drive the end of the beginning of AI, it takes leadership, okay? And specifically, I think it takes humility and bravery. What I mean is that we need business leaders in organization, starting from the board at the level of executives that are willing to learn about the opportunities that AI is driven, that want to know about the risk of AI, that acknowledge the potential of AI, and are really willing to do. At the same time, next to this humility, they have to be business leaders, brave enough to sponsor outcome-based AI initiatives. So it's really about business leaders. They need to be humble and need to be brave. But at the same time, if I look at the technologist, the AI expert, I think no matter if they are part of startups, big companies, whatever, I think all of these experts, they need to be humble enough to learn about business models and opportunities, and at the same time, brave enough to focus their effort on some specific areas versus playing everything. Okay, so I think at the end of the day, it boils down to bridging the gap between organizational functions and technology experts. And I do believe that a forum like this one is definitely something that can accelerate the creation of this culture.
Well put, wonderful. You spoke about the humbleness of learning and seizing opportunities. What such opportunity for AI did the crisis bring in your environment, maybe at Johnson & Johnson?
So, good question, Pascal. So look, I think if the crisis has taught us anything at Johnson & Johnson is that IT is more than the technology that we enable, but it's really about accelerating and amplifying our ability to improve people's lives. So the first lessons learned, the first opportunity is that technology can and has to be transformational versus purely opportunistic, okay? And that represents a great opportunity for AI. Now, to be more specific, and if I look at my supply chain domain, I think a clear opportunity is that supply chain leaders in the new mode, supply chain leader out of this crisis, they will have to work with a stronger sense of agility to respond to fluctuation in the demand. I think what we have seen, all companies, no matter the industry, no matter the region they are based, all companies, they have seen unprecedented changes in their demand. And we've seen unprecedented changes on how quickly the demand changes. Okay? So technology is a tremendous opportunity if I look at this. So technology is a tremendous opportunity to really accelerate and create the agility in the supply chain that we need from demand management all the way down to the last mile. And at the same time, another opportunity, and to me this is really big, is I think the crisis has shown that we have to completely rethink the concept of business continuity. We have to enhance the concept of business continuity. I think any company had challenges sourcing raw materials from country A versus country B. Companies had issues in terms of distributing product to their customers. So the overall dimension of resilience of the supply chain is an incredible opportunity for AI to play a role. Okay.
I would like to get back to the topic of resilience later on. Yes, indeed.
Yeah. And I think just the final point of resilience, because you're right, that's a big one. And I think the last unique opportunity is that few business continuity plan included in the resilience dimension, the remote work scenarios. So the fact that when we build resilience, we have to build the resilience in a scenario where some or most of our employees are working from home. So it's really about resilience, agility, and the role of technology.
Wonderful. Amazing. That's really a concentrate of experience here and opportunities you've identified, and I'm sure you're going to go after. Moving on to the panel, Afger, what did you take along from the crisis to make something positive out of it?
I think I can agree with Massimo there on many of his points. And I think one other thing that maybe the crisis has done is that, well, it has sped up the digital transformation, right? And one thing that it has done for like the small and mid-sized companies, they have now started to digitize documents and processes. And I think this is a huge opportunity in the future for these companies to also start engaging with the topic of AI and data science, because they will now have a huge amount of new data, and with that, possible applications of AI.
Indeed. Thierry, what about you? What did you observe as an opportunity you want to go after?
Just as in private life, the recent months helped us a bit to put our feet back on the ground and to come back to reality when it comes to AI. There's been a lot of beautiful, slideshows and videos and what have you, articles that talked about the future. I think currently a lot of companies are focusing on, quite rather short-term ROIs and having impact in something real. And that's going to help AI tremendously and everything that is related to whatever you understand under the two letters, to make it real and, again, to help us get out of that winter to a certain extent, I'm pretty convinced.
Right. So to put it in a different way, this crisis, the pandemic has shaped a form of a new normal, right? It's not only about remote working, it's about behaviors, hygiene, lots of what we've heard before about the acceleration in the digitalization altogether and the supply chain in particular. How do you see the new normal, and maybe what have been the biggest shifts?
Been a lot of shifts that affected us personally, like physical distancing, of course, for example. But I see three key developments that have been forced to accelerate over the last couple of weeks and months, and still are in some places. And they exemplify different ways how AI can be leveraged, specifically in a business context. The first one is, how do you maintain your customer communications? How do you upgrade your channels for bi-directional conversations when people cannot come to your store or not come to your branch? How do you monitor and analyze changing behavior? You can do that with AI in several forms. How do you personalize content and messaging on all channels? Many companies have been sitting on data for a long time, and now they have an opportunity to use it in a smart way. Massimo talked a lot about supply chain. There was a point in time where we all were a bit afraid whether we'll have enough toilet paper in the house. So I'm not going to go into details there. You all know it. I'd like to go back to the point of resilience that was just mentioned earlier. How can AI help us assess current vulnerability levels? That's something that it has been used for before. How can it help us increase security? How can it accelerate and prioritize reaction times when we actually find out that something happened? And these are elements that are becoming much more obvious, particularly during the crisis, where we had an increase also of malevolent attacks to our systems.
Indeed. So maybe then going back to Massimo about the new normal, are there business opportunities? No, are there? I don't want to reuse the term opportunity, but is there new businesses that you see unfolding that you want to tackle with AI? And you already spoke about resilience. What will be your concrete actions on that?
Yeah, to me, there's definitely something on resilience. And I think if I look at the resilience, we believe at Johnson & Johnson that resilience is a combination of infrastructure, technology, systems, processes, and culture as well. Okay, so Pascal, I believe that AI can definitely move the needle in terms of the process and the infrastructure dimension of resilience. So I do look at AI and technology in general as a key enabler to actually look at resilience. But we should not forget about the culture and the leadership dimension. Okay, so I think that next to AI, if we want to move the needle on resilience, we need to look at the cultural dimension as well, and making sure that leaders and anybody in the organization understand why we have to be resilient. Okay, so I think it's an opportunity, but it has to go together with the other opportunity, which is the leadership evolution of this digital thing. And I think the other part, Pascal, that I want to call out is how you ask a good question. How the new normal look like? Look, I think if we look at a healthcare business, I think we are definitely going to see a tremendous change in the way that we're going to interact with our customers. I think Thierry mentioned it, starting from the development and the launch of the new product. Because this crisis has taught us that the way we interact internally between R&D, commercial, and supply chain, but also externally with the regulatory agencies, with partners, external company, has to change. Okay, so I do see a tremendous opportunity for technology again to recreate this ecosystem within the healthcare industries between regulatory agencies, companies, and patients, eventually to make sure that there are new methods and new processes for product launches.
That's a wonderful segue, actually, into a next topic around defining ethics and governance across industries, facilitated by AI. I don't know, Afka, can you share your views on that?
Definitely. I mean, I think one of the things when we're speaking about a next AI winter is we need to gain the trust of the users, right? And how can you do that? You need to ensure that your models, your artificial intelligence are ethical and build the necessary governance around it. And there are actually a few best practices that we can learn on. I mean, first of all, any company that works with data, especially when people data is involved, they should install an ethics board if they haven't done so already. But I think that's not sufficient. I think another thing that we as an industry need to do is to start thinking about how can we educate our data scientists and day-to-day practitioners so that ethical data science is sort of embedded in their nature. And we can also look at other industries. And I think the healthcare industry is one of the industries that is already a lot further than many of the others and when it comes to regulations and things. But I like to use, due to my background, the actuaries as an example in the insurance industry. What do they do that we can learn from? I mean, they have postgraduate certifications, internal audits. Regulation requires actually an external certified actuary to review the models and provide their signature next to the external accountant as part of the annual report, right? And these are practices that generally aren't available in the AI and data science space. And I think this is also not something that will happen overnight. But what I would recommend companies to start with is to require model documentation before any system goes into production. And a second step, I guess, that companies could take here is to have their models or these model documentation reviewed by another specialist.
Okay, yeah, makes sense.
And I guess that maybe to add on that way, we can, as an industry, start to prepare for the regulations that will come, right? And it's just a question of when will they come.
Yes, and in banking, we'd have the 3 lines of defense, but this is an entirely new topic. From
Exactly.
a time perspective, we already need to wrap up, and I would like to ask you, you all, a final question. Maybe Afke, it is, and FB mentioned that he wouldn't want to be a data scientist, right? In these times, can you tell us a little bit about the frustration of being a data scientist or an AI practitioner, and maybe what should be the management's response to it?
Definitely. And there, what Massimo mentioned before already, like this bridge that we need to make, I'm fully with that. It's very important. Maybe on that, before speaking at the Applied Machine Learning Days earlier this year, I did a small survey around practitioners in the field. And what I could tell actually for the main reason for people in the field to be frustrated, and believe me, there are actually quite a few, unfortunately, in their jobs is AI literacy on management level. And through that, the ability to provide the commitment and the required resources it needs to bring AI to a success. Yeah. And the same reasons actually were provided for companies not being able to generate this value. I mean, AI is no magic, we know that. And especially in a first project, I guess it can take you up to 2 years until you start generating a return on investment. Because basically what you're doing is you're building a new factory, right? After that, it can go quicker. So what can leaders do, right? That want to use AI for the benefit of the organization and not just for using the buzzword, they should educate themselves. Yeah, and this means not only understand what is AI, and the possible applications, but also what it takes to bring AI to a success in their organization. And once you do, you'll be able to provide the commitment it takes beyond this prototype that Massimo mentioned earlier, and provide the required resources and skills to get to generating really return on investment.
Thank you so much, Afke. Massimo, you've been quoted a few times. Can I ask you for a closing sentence on maybe just an enabler at Johnson & Johnson that you are using to responding to or building the new norm?
Yeah, look, I think what we did is we look at yesterday's operation, yesterday's word, and tomorrow's word. And we really try to readjust our strategies accordingly. So it's more than one, it's a set of enablers. If I had to talk about one, it's re-looking at our portfolio of capabilities, investment, technologies, and identify the critical must-wins priorities that we want to go ahead with. Meaning that at the same time, we identify what we do not want to go ahead with. Okay, so if I had to call a one is a very strong and robust prioritization process to identify the critical few that we want to go ahead with, and the ones that we want to kill, assessing how we believe that the new norm will look like.
Okay. And this then maybe, thank you very much. And Thierry, then to sum it up in a way, how will AI help you belong to the post-crisis winners in a way and differentiate for the quote-unquote losers in that sense?
There are a lot of examples for processes that are affected and can benefit from AI going forward. You know, we heard supply chain, we heard customer and employee engagement, moving to the virtual world or to a different interaction with the home office. Companies close their financial books remotely. I think there's two things that might fall down a little bit after the crisis. One thing is we need to keep innovating. Yeah? All the organizations should continue to grow and to advance. First of all, you shouldn't care that much about the IT. That's companies like mine who take care of that, you know, data centers, hardware, cloud, that stuff, and specifically security. You should focus on how you add value in the world around you. Keep innovating and make sure that actually everybody can participate. Because the second part is how do you create the interface with humans, right? We're designing a lot for the citizen scientists, so for the aka the normal person who wants to use AI. In fact, we sometimes even hide AI or machine learning behind our enterprise software, such that a salesperson can just get a next best action, or a financial expert can play with scenarios, and they don't have to care about which algorithm they're using. The software will do that behind the scenes. The last thing is you should make those tools adaptable, because in the end, humans will continue to adapt technology to their needs and follow the path of least resistance, and this will not stop with any crisis.
Thank you very much, Thierry, Massimo, Afker. I think, Dalit, it's more than time to wrap up, which is a difficult task. I've written down so many buzzwords, but I think the panel does see ways out of the AI winter and very much into an AI spring, because many of the building blocks that were there before in Afker's opening comment have been moved away, like the sheer processing power. And speaking about technology, it is true that the crisis has shown more potential and opportunities than for further threats to deploy AI. And I can only observe that the humans, the people, have been mentioned a lot in this panel discussion, be it for management, the way Massimo puts it, about the bravery and the humbleness, but also the education thereof, the patience needed to deploy solutions, and not to forget that AI actually is meant to serve the people in an ethical fashion and not be a Selbstzweck in German, a means of its own in English. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. I could listen for much more to your discussion. It was very, very interesting. And there is one sentence that I think Massimo really put it to the next stage, is that actually the corona pandemic could somehow put the end of the beginning of AI and will empower us to take the next step. So again, thanks a lot. We do have some questions who came across. I would like to ask the audience to either pop into the backstage to discuss furthermore, or reach out in the one-to-one. There are so many that it's difficult to pick one and remain fair. So for that, I would like to thank you all for this great panel, for the participation and the sharing your experience in such a transparent way. Saying that, I would like to introduce you to the next speakers. The next speakers, we have Armando Gello. He's the managing partner at Sensei. His experience is grounded in over a decade of applied computational decision support with industries and startups, government, and nonprofit clients. He has deep knowledge and expertise in agile elicitation, collaborative modeling, problem solving and scoping, and socio-technical system design, and strategic trend scouting and analysis. Academically, Armando pursued his passion to innovate I'm gonna restart quickly. His passion to innovate and devise purposeful and sustainable interaction between humans and machine at the University of Zurich, at the ETH, the Center for Polymodeling, Georgia Madison University, and Columbia University. On the other hand, we have Quentin Ladetto. He is a research director at ARMA Swiss Science and Technology. He leads the Technology Foresights program with goal is to anticipate and get the necessary understanding of the emerging technologies which might have implication for the military in the general and the Swiss armed forces in particular. After a PhD in geomatics from the Swiss Institute of Technology in Lausanne, Quentin joined Safran Vector Executive to produce a pedestrian's navigation system developed during his thesis. The product was successfully selected to be part of the US Land Warrior military program. Prior to joining Arma Swiss, he worked with different startups, companies helping developing various hardware and software solutions in the field of internet mapping, fleet and asset management, Internet of Things. In parallel, Content completed an executive MBA in Management and Corporate Finance from HEC Lausanne and a diploma in Technology Management in IMD. Guys, the virtual stage is yours.
Yeah, we are all set. So welcome to this presentation entitled Gamification for Novel Strategic Options. I'm Campbell, and together with my colleague Armando Geller, we will focus for the next 50 minutes. It's in what I realize is a really concrete question of implementation.
Great comment. A return on investment on AI takes 2 years.
We will try to answer to the question, how can I experience something if this something does not exist? So this is a challenge that you face when you do foresight. And considering the entity I'm working for and the context, one answer translates normally into something called wargaming. So by just taking the most famous example, which is the Battle of Midway during World War II, this illustrates a little bit the mindset that you should have or not have when doing some wargaming, because the solution of what really happened was played unforeseen during the simulation, but the hypothesis that was strongly in the mindset of the people that the ship should come from Pearl Harbor didn't really happen and result in the loss of the battle. So by having too many cognitive bias playing these things, then you can run into a lot of problem, and as we know, the rest is history. So we didn't really do like the Hollywood movie said with all this nice infrastructure, but this is us as well wargaming. Now familiar with this type of exchange and simulation, what you try to do here is really anticipate what you normally could not anticipate. But at this level, what we realize is that we were talking about a lot of strategic decision. And what I'm responsible of technology foresight, so the technology has an impact on that. So we would like in the discussion people to focus not on the strategy, but on the technology. And in order to do so we started 3 years ago with various partners in iterative process, and we came out with a result that looks a little bit different than the one that you saw before. So it's not at country level, it's not at a high altitude with a big strategic decision, but really concrete operational element. And the solution we come out with is a commercial game that will be available in September that introduces and has rules. It has figurine-like actors or agent, as we say, and it has dices, so that if you take a decision, it might not happen automatically. You may be fortunate or unfortunate in the game. So with that in mind, so we were happy, but then playing that, we realized that there were new questions rising. And this new question where, do new technology requires new strategy? So that's a really interesting question. And I guess it's not only something that you find in the defense or military business. I mean, if you want to launch a new product on the market, you may ask yourself if the product will change the habit of people and how this will interact with each other. But at the same time, I mean, it's not a tabletop game anymore. And then, I mean, you figure it out that if we are presenting this here, is that you may have some kind of AI involved. And building or willing to go with this, to measure the impact of new strategy, we need to team with experts in this field. And this is the reason why you see here different entities we are closely working with. And you see as well that there are different artificial intelligence we are teaming as well with. So Dalit and Andy, I guess you see that we are not over with our interaction here. So today, it is my pleasure to give the word now to Armando Geller, who is the managing partner of Sensei, to present what he is doing for AI simulation and how he is helping us to take the right and bring the right decision and focus on the new technology we are trying to anticipate. So Armando, the floor is yours.
So thank you so much, Quentin, and thank you to Swiss Cognitive for giving us the opportunity to present this exciting work. That, as mentioned by Quentin, was done in collaboration with Arma Swiss. And the idea there was to team up to build this automated version using simulation of a commercial board game called New Techno War that originally was a pure manual game. And to do so, we used a very specific kind of simulation, so-called multi-agent simulations. And these multi-agent simulations are our company's bread and butter for about the last 10 years. So what is a multi-agent simulation? Well, in principle, it's a digital twin of a real-world system, such as a traffic system, financial trading, or as a military operation. So the first thing you basically do is to build a static snapshot of this system you're interested in. This snapshot or this model, as you can see here on the slide, describes individuals' socio-demographics, such as age, such as gender, where they live, how much income they have, and so forth. In the model, we call them agents. And you also describe their behavior and their social behaviors. They work, they get up in the morning, they eat, they earn money, and so forth. And then you also describe their reasoning. They can have strategic reasoning, they learn, and so forth. And finally, you describe the socio-technical infrastructure. So taking all this together, we get the model of the real world. We call this model sometimes also synthetic population. Then this snapshot is spun forward in time and animated based on the behavioral rules that we just specified and based on other rules. And that's what we call simulation. And the output of this simulation then resembles in key parameters the real world, such as statistical signatures, social networks, and so forth. And simulations are helpful to make descriptions and diagnostics and predictions and prescriptions also that are relevant for working with the real world system. Next slide, please. I'll show you now how we used multi-agent simulation to automate the new Techno War board game. So the first thing we basically did is we played the game ourselves on the board. And we recorded the game outcomes manually, as you can see here on the slides. And each sketch represents blue and red military units that moved around during the game. These are the dashed lines, which firing positions they actually took. These are the blue and red dots. and what they actually shot at. These are the solid lines. Next slide. We then digitized those sketches. Next slide, please. And then we simulated the game. The simulation was rendered, as I just explained, similarly to this digital twin, and it used exactly the same rules as the original game board does. The outcomes of the simulated games were also sketched, and as were the outcomes of the real world games. Now, when you see actually these sketches now on the slide, these are all simulated games, and those little numbers on the top right in each sketch actually refer to the number of simulations we ran. So in total, we ran about 10,000 simulations. Next slide. We then applied machine learning to compare the real world games with the simulated games, okay? So, but what we didn't do is we didn't simulate a particular game. What we did was we just had the simulation play the game and then check whether we come up with simulated games that resemble real games. Okay, otherwise we would be overfitting the model, or would be basically amount to somewhat cheating. That's something we didn't want to do. Next slide, please. So what we find is, thanks. So what we find is that the simulation indeed produces realistic outcomes. The point cloud in the middle of this slide represents about 1,000 simulated games. And using, again, machine learning, single simulated game outcomes have been classified into 3 distinct clusters, here shown as brown, blue, and green. The real-world games resemble only the outcome in cluster 1, which is the brown cluster 1, okay? And the simulation, however, found many more plausible game outcomes, things we haven't really thought about when we were actually playing it. These are the games in the clusters colored blue and green. So now recall the introductory example made by Conte of Midway. So by analogy, carriers arriving from Pearl Harbor, they basically represent the brown clusters. And that's what was planned for. Carriers arriving from Midway, however, they represent the clusters colored in blue and green. That's basically the unthinkable universe, but it nevertheless happened. Furthermore, when 2 humans are playing the game, chances are that blue, the defender, wins by up to 40%. So blue has a higher chance in reality to win than actually in the simulation. We couldn't replicate this, okay? Instead, in the simulation, blue has a chance of winning only 1 out of 30. So we were able to improve blue's AI, making a few tweaks in the algorithms, but only then, but then also blue only won 1 out of 10 times. And again, we didn't want to overfit. So the simulation actually demonstrates that humans also have a tendency to are overconfident with regard to their chances of winning. Next slide, please. So what's the value added of using this kind of simulation? Well, first, rendering tabletop games as computer simulations allows us to check multiple scenario variants very quickly. And secondly, we don't go down the rabbit hole of familiar patterns. Simulations don't do that, okay? Next slide, please. So my question is, do you want to play a game with us with regard to new technology? Shall we introduce new technology into the game, or shall we actually have you play against the machine? So with this outlook for future development, I thank you, and I hand over to Conta for the outro.
Yeah, thank you very much. So just a finishing slide. We are also interested, together with Swiss Cognitive, to see the interaction and better understand the interaction between technology and society. So there is a new version of the questionnaire online. So please give us your input. It's very, very welcome. And with this, we would like to close this presentation. And we are moving to the room to answer, to the backstage to answer question, but would you have anything at any time, please don't hesitate to contact us. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Amanda and Quentin. Great having you with us again. And thanks actually to remind the people to go to backstage and discuss with you on further question. One question I would like to do here in the audience, is this applied Q learning?
So if it's not Q for Quentin, I let Armando answering the question.
You're great.
So what we're actually doing is we mainly play with reinforcement learning. And in this particular case, multi-agent or distributed reinforcement learning.
Thanks. And another one is, are you using game theory foundations such as Nash, Equilibria?
So game theory does actually play a role, in particular when we apply some nth-order rationality thinking, some bounded rationality thinking. Nash equilibriums, yes, to a certain degree.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I'm thanking you for sharing your experience with us. Please remain at the backstage. Again, to the audience who wants to exchange with our speakers, you have the possibility to go in a virtual backstage room or also get into one-to-one, which can be scheduled through the banner that you can see. Now, I would like to give you an announcement about our last speaker also. So please remain with us, because at the end we will have Thomas Campbell giving us great insights about future grasps. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce you to our next two speakers. On one hand, we have Isabelle Müller, and she holds the role of sustainability expert at Allianz Swiss Real Estate, where she's responsible for the sustainability strategy, its implementation, and reporting. With her master's degree in environmental science from the ETH, she started her career in a sustainability rating agency and then moved to the field of corporate real estate and thereafter real estate as an asset class. With her, we do have Martin Keller. He's the co-founder and CEO of Turicode, a young technology company driven by the mission to turn documents into value. Previously, he worked for a management consulting firm in the financial service industry. Martin holds an MA in International Relations at the Graduate Institute and an MBA from EASA Business School. Thanks, the stage is yours.
Welcome everyone to our presentation. As Dalit said, my name is Isabelle Müller and I'm the responsible for the topic of sustainability at Allianz Swiss Real Estate. And I'm very happy to be presenting you together with my colleague Martin Keller from Turicode, our use case called Reducing Carbon Footprint. So why did Allianz reach out to Turicode to collaborate? You see here on the slide, there are 3 boxes, and our use case is focusing on the box number 1. When I took over the project in 2019, I was confronted with a threefold challenge. First of all, to gather the data of the resources our buildings are consuming. Secondly, to calculate our CO2 footprint thereof. And thirdly, to model a reduction path. So to see if we reach net zero by 2050. At the basis of step 2 and 3 must necessarily lie reliable data. The second and the third challenge are definitely way more in my domain knowledge than the first. So with this said, I'd like to set the scene of the challenges we faced for the step number 1 for the gathering of the data. Allianz Swiss Real Estate has 300 buildings. And with these 300 buildings, there is a lot of invoices we get and a lot of invoice pages we get. We focused for this first CO2 footprint on 6 electricity suppliers. And with that, we got around 25,000 invoice pages that were needed to be extracted. These informations were split up on different resources. So we had electricity, gas, and information on our district heating consumption. It was not just the consumption, but also the cost and the location, as well as the period that this data was compiled of. Having said that we needed to calculate a CO2 footprint and the modeling of the reduction path, this would all need to be stored in a growing database, meaning it was for us a necessity that we do not have just a one-time ad hoc reporting, but also a growing database with historic data available. Always when you do something for the first time, you face a lot of challenges, and I'd like to point some of these challenges out to you. We have our own real estate management system, and this real estate management system is not necessarily set up to process consumption data. It is set up to process mostly financial information. And with that, we were confronted with the challenge of document filtering. The 25,000 invoices were not necessarily all related to energy suppliers. Plus, all the documents that we gave Turicode for extraction were varying greatly in formats and quality. So, for example, we had native PDFs, but also scans, plus some handwriting on top. There was the information that we needed to extract was available on different pages, varying from the different energy suppliers. And the bill, lastly, were also very heterogeneous in layout and structure. With that said, we were very lucky to have Turicode along on our side, and Martin is now going to show you the approach and their Mint extract software.
Can you hear me? Hello, everyone. Okay. So thank you, Isabel. So the challenge basically is on how to bring this information that is human readable on the left, being in scans or PDF, how we can transform it into a world where a machine can actually read it. And to do this, there are 3 main steps actually that go there. First, it's a classification step where we filter out relevant from non-relevant document type. As Isabel mentioned, there were all third-party invoices, not only invoices related to energy consumption, so we somehow needed to find out to do it. The second part is the data extraction, which is the crucial part to get to the data, which can be normally text, but it can also be images. Sometimes it's also table elements. And the third one is afterwards the analysis part. That is also an important part in order to add additional information that is not available in documents, or also do automated validation or mappings. And in each of these 3 steps, AI or machine learning more specifically supports the process, because as we know, there are quite a few advantages in terms of flexibility, in terms of also efficiency. But of course, when using AI, we also know that there are quite a bit of disadvantages. Just think of, you need to first come up with a training set that is a proper training set, that the output quality can only be as good as the input quality. And also that normally it needs quite a bit of coding skills in order to come up with those algorithms. So basically that's a challenge. And when thinking of AI, it definitely helps to think from a user perspective, because then actually we can really broaden it and more generalize it. So to give you an example on how users can actually build their own AI, let's dig into the example here. What you see here is a web application, and normally starting with machine learning means starting to build a training set. So therefore we are here in the training environment, whereas in the next step we then go into more production environment. And building up the training set, we can show it here. We have different folders, so a business user can upload a new document, can then go into a training set. This training set here consists of 4 documents of one energy provider. And in this energy provider, the users can do annotation. Basically, it's training the system. And it trains all the relevant points, all the points that are relevant to them. So, for example, here on the page 3, there are interesting information regarding the counter, regarding the measuring point, regarding the product, the resource, the time, spam, also the volume and the price. And that's something that users do. And here, of course, machine learning systems that just need few training data are let's say, more suitable if the end user is doing it, because you see here we have different layouts, and what the user will do typically is to draw a box with the mouse and then tell to the system what kind of data points they're actually looking into it. And by doing so, it's important to mention that such a system is not, let's say, template-based. That was basically the technologies that we used 20 years ago, and were very good, because either we found a result or we didn't found one. When using machine learning, we have a more flexible approach. However, it also comes with accountability, meaning that we need to label it very consistently. For example, here, when we look for addresses, when we look again for counters, when we look for resources, this initial work needs to be done. So by doing so, the customer basically, or the subject matter expert can build this training set, can then click on the train button, and we get the scoring. The scoring is basically a prediction of how well the machine learning system has been doing with the input available. And of course, here we need to be very close to what human is capable to do so. Also, we as a human do errors from time to time, but we can only add really value if we come here close to human accuracy. So this F1 score basically tells us, did we find all the data points that we were supposed to find? And if we found so, are they actually correct? So users add here documents and maximize the F1 score. And then once we are happy with it, we turn into the production mode. And in this production mode, it's basically where we then run through all the different documents. To give you an example here, so if we have such a document, it can be a scan or a PDF, or sometimes also emails, we load them in, and then in the next step, it's getting classified. And within this folder, we now get the prediction on what has been read out by the machine. And it looks a bit like a PDF reader, what you have here in front, but on the right, you can already see the data that have been now extracted automatically by the machine. And basically also the different line items. So we have the products, the resources, time span, volume, and the price. And from here, users then can export it in a machine-readable format, such as a Excel, JSON, XML normally, how the consuming system wants to receive the data. Or also they can do changes, sometimes also corrections, and then add it by using this add to training set button, where it automatically gets transferred into the training set. You see, we have now here 5 documents. We can rerun the training and basically thereby also improve the system over time. So this is a bit of a sneak preview on how machine learning system cannot just be used by coders or by data scientists, but actually by the end users that really has the domain knowledge available. Now, the output of what we have done together is, as Isabel mentioned, a database, a growing database that once was filled up with historic data and now can be used during the normal financing process. So whenever an invoice is coming in, it can run through the pipeline, and in addition also extracts the energy data that then are used to reduce the CO2 footprint. What we would like to highlight in the next 3 minutes are what's the benefits that we have experienced so far, but also a bit more on the lessons learned.
Thank you, Martin. For us, the greatest benefit was the enormous amount of times we could save with the AI reading or extracting the data from all these energy bills. It would have been a lot of manual and also error-prone repetitive work that nobody here in-house had a lot of appetite to do. And also we could not just save this amount of time and error-prone work, we could also focus on the analysis and the modeling of the CO2 footprint and reduction path. So we greatly benefited of being able, through the collaboration with TuiCode, to focus more on our domain knowledge and let the techies do the work that they major.
Now, when looking at the lessons learned, you're saying it, Isabel, it's always a combination on machine learning and domain knowledge. We see that machine learning is a very interesting technique that offers up new opportunities, but at the same time, it really becomes powerful when it can be applied by business users. Because the business user at the end knows best what kind of data he or she needs and how they are actually hidden or trapped in different documents or formats in general. So what is actually necessary is that end users can somehow interact, can take influence, can also steer the entire process. And by doing so, also adopting then basically the new techniques. And someone with more a technical background, of course, can support, can enhance the models, can enhance the algorithms, but overall, it's always an interplay that should be driven out of business. The second lessons learned is basically when it comes to starting such a project, to not set the goals too limited. Because overall, machine learning and AI in general is very well used for a specific use case, but what we actually want to go is working towards a generic use case or a generic AI. In that case, it is not limited in the scope, but also not limited over time. And when we started this project together with Allianz, we had exactly this in mind, that we actually going to start based on the historic data, but what we actually want to do is to set up a service out of it that can be consumed 24/7, which is now the case. And therefore, actually, we were able to pass from an ad hoc one-time topic into a more recurring way. And the third lessons learned, I think it's overall that in general, businesses are sitting actually on a pile of documents or a pile of information that would be very valuable. But sometimes the first thing they do is just go out, look for external benchmarks, but actually they have everything in-house. It's just the question on how we can access it, how we can get there. And therefore, a tooling that is, let's say, easy to use, you need a few clicks, together with the know-how of the subject matter expert, is a very good combination and to solve also additional value and even generate sometimes also new business models. So having said this, this was a bit the tour and of our use case on reducing the carbon footprint. And we want to thank you for your interest and happy to take any questions right now or also in the one-to-one sessions in the next hours and days. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Isabel and Martin, for these great insights. And for me, this was again one of the cases I just love, seeing the partnership, seeing how startups and enterprises can collaborate together and benefit from the core knowledge. And Isabel, you mentioned that one of the things that you were happy about is actually that you were able now to focus on your core competence of your main knowledge and not doing these time-consuming things. How actually did you onboard your employees, the team, to really support the project and bring it further, and at the end to implement it into such a huge enterprise as Allianz is?
Very good question, and I must say it's still an ongoing process. But the people that I could win for these tasks, they of course needed to be very good with data, because as you saw on the first slide, the data extraction is not where it stops, it's actually where it starts. And after this many lines of data, there was a lot more work to be done and a lot more data crunching going on. But what I'm most proud of actually is that this CO2 data is now being used in the asset management and the construction management teams on a daily basis. And that for me is what counts as the success. Because if the data extracted is not being used in any type of business process, then for me, it's not very valuable.
I think you just pointed another point out that is very, very important. How do you measure success when such a project is successful? What are the small milestones that you can actually then tick as a success? Perhaps, Martin, you can give us some insights from your side, also from other clients. What are the small steps where you're actually working towards to make sure that the employee and the client feel the success and is willing to do this iterative process?
Yes, thank you, Dalit. I would answer it in a way that, first of all, it's having the common understanding of the questions, of the key questions that everyone wants to solve. So having this common understanding afterwards is the starting point, which then actually helps to get to that relevant information. And sometimes, of course, we can say, yeah, we can measure it in terms of accuracy, in terms of data quality, in terms of how many man hours one was able to save, but also maybe on the other hand, how we were able to create additional top line by creating new use cases. But this is normally not done in 1 or 2 days, but it's actually being impacted over 2 or 3 years. So the ultimate success is actually if both parties are satisfied and keep on working into the same direction, not just for a specific use case, but actually then continue to get new ideas, having new ideas that could be involved out of a specific use case.
Thanks a lot. So thank you two, for your great insights. Also very much appreciate. We always love, as you saw, the other teams being partners together on stage, discussing the use cases, and we can see both sides because only together we can achieve much more. Now it's time, and sorry, I always forgot to tell you guys, when you want, go into backstage. We have this virtual backstage room. Use it to discuss further with the speakers. Being virtual is a very important thing, is that we're trying to network and bringing you guys together spot on on the topic that you're interested in. So with that, I'm going to introduce you now to Jonathan Wilkes, who I actually introduced right at the beginning. So for all those who just joined now, I will reintroduce him to honor him also being with us on stage, especially sitting in New Zealand. Hi, Jonathan. Jonathan has a vast experience in architecting gamification across mobile and web applications for government, food and beverage, healthcare, and life science. Today, he supports EPAM in global products delivery practice with a focus on insights, engine development, and explaining machine learning, AI, and NLP capabilities. And you, Jonathan, brought me a quote from yourself, what I really would like to share with the audience. Here you go. I never expected the passion for online gaming, creating and managing digital communities to become a meaningful career. However, this created a useful skill set early on, coordinating large teams and creating useful accessibility content. I continue to enjoy, especially in today's climate, working in the heart of the ever-evolving digital space, delivering leading-edge IT solutions across a global audience. Now, the global audience is yours. Thanks, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. I'll just pull my screen up here. All right, excellent. So yeah, thank you very much. So my name is Jonathan Wilkes and I'm with the Enterprise Products Group at EPAM. And today we'll just look at really our response to new opportunities that have arisen through the current environment, where we've had to really apply our modular approach in order to respond quickly to some of these new opportunities. So largely, many of these were through our Insight Engine that I'm a part of with EPAM. So we'll quickly go through kind of what the Insight Engine is, at least from EPAM's perspective, and then how that approach has allowed us to tackle some of these new opportunities that we've had. All right, so firstly, the Insight Engine, and as a typical Insight Engine, this is just what it looks like from EPAM's perspective. So we've got a lot of data aggregation occurring. A lot of these can be from proprietary sources or your public sources. And a new box for us is really along the bottom left-hand side there, the streaming content. So as more and more businesses go contactless, this is a more important data type for analysis. So this has been a really new and evolving data entity for us to aggregate and then to try and identify insight from this new type of, evolving type of data set. So that's been a new kind of addition to how we've had to deal with it from an Insight Engine perspective. So the aggregation is then created in order to create the meaningful insights. So we have layers of tagging and indexing, and then the text analytics, which is really where the machine learning, AI, and NLP is applied. So forming the neural networks for all the entities that have been extracted from all the aggregated data, and then applying that that relevance, the weightings, all of the meaning behind the data in order to generate some type of insight. So let's see that there. So the output is really important, the delivery channels. So in order to be as agile as possible, we've created each of these kind of buckets in our approach has been to be as modular as possible. So the content sources, it doesn't matter what the latest repository is, we need to be agile, we need to be able to have connectors into whether it's a proprietary source, a private source, publicly accessible, or a streaming source. We need to have that type of aggregation in order to connect and make meaning out of what's useful for the clients. We then have the output delivery channels, which then we personalize and have as a customization view. So you'll see through the use cases, many kind of customized views. In order to have this modular approach, we've been very service agnostic. So it doesn't matter what the latest services, we can connect into that, whether it's GCP or Azure Cognitive Services or Deep Speech, whatever it is, we can kind of pivot around what's going to be usable, what are the existing subscriptions with the client, whatever it is to kind of make that as easy as possible and really just focus on generating the insight, creating an output that's meaningful for the client, and then having that as the main focus. The customized delivery is really what is always the most important view to create. So we have that very services agnostic approach, and that allows us to really focus on what's important, creating those neural networks and relevance, the scoring, the weightings, all the setting, all the thresholds, all of the kind of scores that we can create in order to have that very meaningful singular view for the client. So that's really been our focus, having this kind of modular delivery for this streaming content and the traditional digital data as well. So it's kind of a convergence of all of those aspects. All right, so one of the key use cases for our COVID rapid response from the enterprise products group anyhow was creating a dashboard for the Health Data Research Innovation Gateway in the UK. So this was aggregating all the social media, online publicly available data, aggregating that in order to create a symptom map, medical devices map as well. So whether there was mentions of shortages or whatever the key aspects were, we were able to aggregate all that information and then layer on NLP in particular for this example. So having the natural language processing generate that insight and aggregate all that information and generate kind of the scoring and weightings allowed us to have a throttle to identify what was most important and then kind of have that throttle to remove noise and then focus in on what's really important. So being able to create and slice that data based on key personas like patient or nurse or healthcare provider really helped us to refine that key and important information. The second example that was similar to this delivery was creating a kind of a command and control center. So aggregating in multiple languages in the EU, this type of information. So layering the heat map information aggregates all the social information, some proprietary sources as well, and kind of having that aggregated layer of both internal sources and external sources, aggregating that information and then having all of that information be easily filterable and digestible. And again, adding in those neural networks to develop the really high relevance, be able to just filter out the noise and spam and really focus in on what's important, what's most likely genuine information. So I'll just show a very quick demo of that approach. So again, being able to create the layer in that social data, aggregate the information, and then have very key kind of meaningful data pop out, and then be able to throttle that over time and see how the trends over time change, and then how the different personas and candidate information as well kind of changed over time. So being able to create a nice output, which can be through either our insight engine output or just fed into a BI tool like Power BI, where it's easily digestible information, easily accessible for any end user, and having that kind of that breakdown of information, the key kind of information that they were looking for were sort of the mapped symptoms, and then the shortages of potential devices and distributors and where the locations were. So being able to have that easily mapped out and broken down by key visuals, and then being able to drill down by you know, right into that micro level was a you know, really important data view to spin out and make accessible in a view like this through, you know, through a simple BI tool. So having the neural networking and aggregation and data slicing occur kind of in the back end, and then have a nice visual output that would be easily accessible. Okay. I think maybe someone has started screen sharing, but if there is no issues, I'll continue. Yes, can still see my screen? Okay, great. All right, so the second use case, was looking at more life sciences driven. So where we have, again, more kind of contactless interactions through video calls and customer service lines and so forth. So there was a huge influx for some healthcare companies and life sciences companies that were dealing with product feedback and calls, and they were looking for a way to really help prioritize any escalation and workflow improvements. So we were able to apply NLI, so natural language intent, more understanding, and being able to generate meaning from kind of the emotion of the speaker, the words and features that were being mentioned. So layering in things like the open FDA and WebMD sources, symptoms and other kind of causes and side effects. Being able to kind of layer in all those kind of features that would pop up during the call, either in real time or as a batched analytics review at the end of a call. Being able to create kind of a summary that would pinpoint these key attributes was the objective. So I'll just quickly show what that actually looks like. So during a call on the left-hand side, that kind of all processes, and then in real time, let me just reshare here. All right. Okay, should be sharing now. So along the left-hand side, we have we had the chat log processing. So the audio is converted and translated into text. The text is then in real time generating these features and IDs, which can create those key personas. So being able to create the entity of, say, the grandpa that was mentioned, the adverse event, maybe mentions of products and other conditions. So in this transcription, which is processed in real time, we're able to create these IDs and events that occur and creating these individual IDs and events that can be utilized for either escalation purposes or for review post, reviewing kind of the overall process, workflow improvements and so forth. So this is then creating and exporting as well a kind of a report of creating these individual tickets that then have have important attributes that are consolidated and aggregated. So things like severity level are then able to be easily detectable. Okay, I'll reshare. Okay, so as this pops up, I'll just very quickly point out along the right-hand side, we're able to create a severity level associated with the events through the transcripts that have been transcribed in real time from audio in order to say, hey, here are the, the companies or the drugs or the products mentioned, the adverse reaction, the severity level. All of these are able to be kind of aggregated and then created as a key output and then prioritization workflow in order to help the either sort of pharmacovigilance or other output and workflow optimization. So this is just a typical view from life sciences and healthcare that we often are required to create, and the natural language intent and understanding was a really helpful aspect in addition to that delivery in creating the optimization and the workflow improvements that are occurring more and more. And then just finally, with the kind of the final minute, we have the social media engagement as well. So very similar approach, aggregating the social media data and then generating insight in order to create relevance and prioritization. And we've had a very nice increase with this application of NLP to really identify how patients and online communities and online consumer groups are really discussing a topic. So we always layer in, what's traditionally acceptable from industry perspective, but having the application of the NLP and how folks really discuss a topic has added in that additional layer of identification and being able to really pinpoint a persona and pre-qualify that audience, whether it's patients or consumers. It's been a very useful engagement. All right, so I think that is all we have time for, so I'll pause here for a little bit.
Thanks a lot for sharing this with us also. One question that came up is, you said that it's about really discussing the topics. How were you able actually to bring the audience to be as transparent and open to share and discuss these various topics?
So in the case of life sciences, we have some relationships with CROs and other organizations where we can get that very direct feedback and input to generate that very transparent information and key criteria and indicators that help us build out the data sets. So we utilize those repositories. In other cases, we'll just identify and pull in publicly accessible information that we can then access through, if required, to adhere to things like data protection laws and so forth. We can mask that information. So that's another way of just gathering that insight, being able to generate and to mask data, prepare that data, and then we can utilize what was publicly accessible through social sources, online sources.
Okay, thanks a lot. So thanks a lot, especially for you. It's really early in the morning. So I guess you're gonna grab a good coffee. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for all those who don't know. Jonathan is logging in from New Zealand, and I guess you guys have about 5 o'clock in the morning, something like that.
It's 4 o'clock at the moment, but yeah, during daylight savings, it is 5.
Okay, so
during
really,
those months.
Thanks a lot for being with us. And so grab your coffee and probably a little bit more of sleep.
All right, thank you very much.
Welcome. So then it's my great pleasure to introduce you to the next speakers. Again, partners. On one hand, we have Stefan Zimmermann, and he is head of customer security at PostFinance with focus on online security and fraud management. Stefan is a business economist. He did the studies in advanced studies in information security and certified information security manager at the CISM. Fabian Kortik is working as a machine learning specialist for Actico, where he has been part of many AI-based projects within the financial service sector. Besides his work within consulting projects, he has also worked as a software engineer at Actico, where he was responsible for integrating AI and ML into the Actico platform. During the 3 years at Actico, Fabian managed to create a proven track record of many successful models that made their way into production. And this is exactly what we love to say, how AI makes its way into production and into business. The virtual stage is yours.
So thank you very much, Dalit, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. And thanks, Swiss Cognitive, to giving us such a beautiful platform. I chose this title, AI-driven security operation success story or fairy tale, which is a bit of a provocative title, I know, but we just wanted to know how far we could go with AI and machine learning. And therefore, I come to the following agenda. With three different blocks. I start okay. I go to this this slide, three different blocks, and to give you at first a slight introduction into the fraud management, I present our fraud management tool, Operation Intelligence, with two components, with anomaly detection and transaction monitoring, and hang on. Okay, so hopefully you can see everything now. Okay, start again. First block, fraud management. I give you an insight about our operation intelligence, which consists of two components, anomaly detection and transaction monitoring. And I will present you the goals for the proof of concept, what we wanted to have a look at. Then I give the word to Fabian from Actico, and he will give you more information about the procedure of the POC, the approach we chose, the figures and data of the analysis and data processing. And at the end, I come to a conclusion and hopefully of an answer if we had a success story or not. So to come to the fraud management. Operation Intelligence is a real-time monitoring of customer interactions, transactions, and orders that will be ensured. Those two components, technical anomalies, we can see how API addresses or session ID can change, or we can verify different information about browser informations. With the transaction monitoring, we verify the content of the transaction in itself. So that is one thing. Then we have the possibility to continuously adapt our rulebook just based on any user information or activity. Then I'll give you an overview about our system, and hopefully you can see that. The event streams from the customer are analyzed by the component ADK. So we have the technical analysis, and can on the other side verify if a transaction is fraudulent or not. There are sessions be generated, and the higher the score, the more it is obvious that a transaction comes from a fraudster. On the other hand, the second component is the transaction monitoring. There we verify that the content of the transaction, that could be amount, or that could be any destination of banks, etc. So we have those two scores, and now I show you the next slide will be a print screen of visual rules. And visual rules is a very performant tool from Actico, which allows us to adapt simultaneously any rule. We process about 50 million events per day, and therefore we need really a performant tool, and that's what we have. So on the next slide, you see that the transaction monitoring. Any payment that runs through different blocks of white and black rules. The white rule could be any tax bill, any telecom bill. Black rules are suspicious criteria, and if a transaction is from the supervising okay, then it could be immediately released. Or if there is any problem, we have to clarify the transaction manually. That means that with about 2 million transactions per day, we had quite an amount of transactions, and that will be about 1,500 per day that are controlled and clarified manually. And therefore, that was the main reason actually to start the POC and to reduce those false alerts. We have as well with business actions like user signing possibilities to trigger actions in different fraud situations, like signing of transactions or session terminations. We can put an e-banking contract into a read-only mode, or blacklist any IP address we want. So that was a short summary of our fraud management system. And I come to the aims for the proof of concept right now. So what we wanted to do first of all, we wanted to learn. We wanted to learn about new techniques, about methods and models, about machine learning and artificial intelligence to support online banking fraud management. So that was one major goal. The second one was had several criteria. As I said, first of all, we wanted to reduce the false positive alerts, which means less manual verification, and less manual verification means less manpower, and less manpower means less costs at the end. Of course, if the back office has more time to verify those alerts, we can improve the decision basis and increase the quality of manual verification. Reduction of fraudulent processes is, of course, as well an efficient goal there. we can adapt promptly and efficiently while cyber attacks or a new situation, and we want to see how easy it is to implement this system in the current fraud management process. Last but not least, costs are very important. We wanted to know how much the investment and potential cost savings were. And now I can give to Fabian, and he will show us a bit more insights about the procedure of the POC. So Fabian, please.
Excuse me, I was on mute. Yeah, so the procedure of the POC looked basically like the following. So the first thing we did was provisioning the server components in Kubernetes. This means that we were installing the Actico machine learning software, as well as our algorithmic backend, which is H2O. The reason why we choose H2O is kind of simple. H2O outputs Java-based models, and this is very convenient as our production system is also running in Java. Yeah, so many machine learning projects use containerization and microservices in order to deploy their models, but this wasn't really an option for us, basically because of two things. So first thing is that we didn't want to add any further complexity to the system. And the second is that we had high requirements for performance, as Stefan has pointed out before. So yeah, this was another consideration where we didn't want to add any latency by calling external applications. So as soon as this was done, we started to investigate the data, which took us actually the most time. So we spent a total of 5 days to prepare the data for a machine learning suitable format. So what we've done is that we have reduced those 2,500 columns in the training data down to 46 columns that we have been using for the training. Yeah, so after successful data preparation, we started to train our first model using a supervised classification approach. But results haven't really been very good. So we had to totally discard this approach. It wasn't working. And the reason why is that the data was highly imbalanced. So this essentially means we had millions of fraudulent, of genuine transactions and just a handful of fraudulent transactions. So very difficult scenario. So we had to come up with a new approach, and we decided to actually implement an anomaly detection using an autoencoder. So you guys are probably now wondering what the hell is an autoencoder. And this is a special type of neural network that you can actually use for many things, but one thing you can do with this is detecting anomalies. So we tried that and realized that the cases, the transactions with the highest anomaly scores are among those that are fraudulent. So using this autoencoder model, we were successfully able to increase the automation rate by 40%. And yeah, so we were quite satisfied with that. So in order to get the buy-in from Postfinos, we also researched further possibilities in order to improve the accuracy of the model. And basically, we came up with some ideas. So one thing you could do is to add further features into the production system. So during the training phase, we saw that we can use other features to improve the accuracy, but they are not available in the production system. So one thing Postfinos could do is that they basically provide the data in the production system so that the model can also make use of that. So there are some other possibilities to further improve it. So we've seen that if you use different models for different customers and transactions, it can also further improve the accuracy of the model. So, but now let's have a look at the technique behind it. So the technique behind it is the Actico platform. So the Actico platform is basically combining business rules and machine learning in order to automate business decisions. Now, in order to automate business decisions, you need some kind of decision logic. You can do this in two ways, basically. So first thing you can do is you use business rules. Well, I mean, you interview your experts in order to come up with a way of a decision logic that you can implement in business rules in like a if, then, when, else kind of fashion. But on the other side, we also have historical data, and we can use this as well to extract decision logic from the data using AI and machine learning. And if we combine both approaches, this is really a successful thing. And in this case, we are able to increase automation rate by 40%. Next slide, please, Stefan. So going live as easy as possible was another important thing. So what you can see here is basically our graphical modeling environment. So for each incoming transaction, we were basically making an autoencoder prediction. This means we are generating anomaly scores. And then we are comparing this anomaly score against a predefined threshold. So in case the anomaly score exceeds the threshold, we are sending this transaction to manual clarification. If the anomaly score is below this threshold, then we are immediately releasing this transaction. All right, so far so good. So Stefan, what do you think? Has this been a success story, or is Actico telling fairy tales?
Good question. Thank you very much, Fabian, for your explanations. I come to the conclusion, and hopefully I can answer the question. And yes, as I can say, it was a success story. With the data we had and with the little actual fraud cases, we were able with non-supervised learning methods to achieve really good results. What does this mean? We were able to reduce the false positive rate about 40%, which means reduction of manual verification of 40%, which is really good. And we decided to go further, to set the model we trained in the POC into production, which happened about 2 days ago. We're now live, and we are trying, of course, to reach the same results as in the POC. So we could reach our goals, we could reduce the manual verifications, we could improve decision bases because back office will have more time to qualify and verify the transactions and the alerts. And we would like to complete our fraud management, and that will help to reduce potential frauds in the future. So this is the point to give a big hand to Actico and to their support and guidance, and thanks to the audience again. So I'm here for questions.
Thanks a lot, guys. Again, it's always great to see the partnerships and how you work hand in hand, everyone with his core competence and knowledge domain. One question that has been arising, and actually it's very legitimate and also somehow clear that this came up. You mentioned that obviously we have less manpower leads us to less costs. Mm-hmm. And this, again, obviously is bringing up the question about how AI is reducing jobs, is making certain tasks redundant. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that, how you actually handled that within the teams?
Yeah, I think the main point is to reduce repetitive work and to allow employees and personnel to focus on more harder fraud cases, in my example, to focus on. So they have more time for quality, and it's not the main interest to reduce personnel, but to have better quality by the end.
Right, thanks a lot. So I really hope also in other industries and areas that on one hand, we obviously can reduce costs and increase quality, and then actually invest the costs that we were able to save into human power. And as you just mentioned, to give them more time to get into the more complicated stuff where you need probably also a little bit of creativity and stomach feeling, what is definitely the core competence of the human being. So thanks a lot, guys, being with us. Have a great evening.
Thank
and
you,
with
Dana.
that, I'm gonna introduce you to our last panel. before our last speaker. The last panel will be showing you the business transformation with the AI maturity and business modeling toolbox. On the panel, we have on one hand, Tiziano Sabbioni. He has always been enthusiastic about innovation and their successful introduction to the market. He studied business and psychology as well as business innovation. During his studies, he successfully built a platform for people moving into Switzerland, which was later taken over by the Swiss market leader in this field. Today, he is a professional inventor for the innovative factory Creolic. In a multidisciplinary team, he helps a wide variety of companies to reinvent themselves and successfully innovate. With us on stage is also Maya Reinshagen. Digital transformation, with all its challenges and opportunities, have been fascinating Maya for over 20 years. She has a deep understanding of the drivers of marketing performance and metrics. Her wealth of experience in developing sustainable strategies and concepts for successful customer data-oriented marketing for large organizations have given her a solid grasp of technology feasibility and achievability. In her position as a director marketing automation at Necentric, she drives the discipline within her company. AI already has a huge influence on how we make the customer's journey even better, says Maya. She brings her experience and new technologies together in her daily business. Thanks for being with us. Then we have Benjamin van Giffen. He's an elected assistant professor at the University of St. Gallen in Switzerland, where he heard the research group and management of AI. In his research, he focuses on the scaling of AI into productive IT application, the design of human AI collaborations, and the design thinking for AI. Benjamin is a scientific advisor in the development of AI maturity and business model toolkit. Frank Seifert has always been at the forefront of creating something new. Based on his career in large companies, he knows how to overcome existing obstacles and lead something new to success. He worked close to 10 years at Swisscom on human-centered design and at Creolic as a professional inventor, and now works as a head of consulting for telecommunications, energy, and media at Adesso in Switzerland. And last but not least, Andy will moderate this panel. Most of you will know Andy. He is my co-founder and managing partner of Swiss Cognitive. As a former CIO for enterprises and a huge and vast experience in different companies, Andy's passion is actually about technology being turned into real business. And first and foremost, obviously, for AI. Andy is not only navigating us together with our community through this new revolution, his passion also is about sailing. Andy is a professional skipper on the oceans from the Arctic to the Caribbean. Sailing gives him a good balance for head and soul. So now the stage is yours. Enjoy.
Yeah, thanks, Dalit, for this introduction. I really appreciate that we have the chance, just a second. Yep. To bring the people together, where we have had last year the chance to see, is so important to understand how we can start our journey in AI. So in our community, we had different workshops, and there we could see it's important to understand how we can start, how we can make first step and second step. But that's probably so hard to articulate. So it's good to have a concept in place and have also a concept in place that you can share and also can see a maturity around you. That's all about the next 25 minutes. And my first question to Maya is where the company stands in implementing AI. You are on mute.
Well, as far as I can judge from my daily customer contacts, many companies are currently watching the development in the field of AI with growing interest, because they think it might have some added value for their own company. But on the other hand, there are many unknown factors, uncertainties, and risks. And even though companies would like to benefit, they don't know where to start and how to quickly implement maybe a small but initial use case without already boiling the ocean. So I noticed that time and again, and not just me. So the idea was then born to create a set of instruments to make these first steps easier. A toolbox, basically, which helps to assess the potential of AI and evaluate how to leverage it concretely for your own company.
That's great. So it's called AI Maturity and Business Modeling Toolbox. So a long title with a great acronym. But who is behind this, Maya?
Yeah, that's very interesting. And actually, the AI MBT, as we call it, has come to existence rather accidentally. It was Frank Seibert, basically, who had the initial idea early last year, I guess in spring, during a during a Swiss cognitive workshop, where he had the idea to kind of develop a new kind of AI assessment. And this idea should then be further developed during a second workshop in early summer last year. And this was then when Frank and me first met. And I had an idea to kind of improve the original ID, and we supplemented then the pure assessment which Frank had developed with 4 additional modules, which should basically enable the user to not just understand the potential of AI within a short time, but also, of course, assess it for himself and assess the own company, but also develop a concrete business case or use case and prioritize then the actions. We then had an immense positive response on our initial ID, and have then further developed this basic ID, and had a great support, especially also from inside Cognizant. This is Cognizant. Netcentric is basically a Cognizant company, and I reached then out to especially 2 colleagues, Aurelio D'Inverno and Nimesh Mistry, who were able to feed our framework with experience-based data from many AI projects that Cognizant has already implemented. On the other hand, we are very glad to have Benjamin van Giffen from University of St. Gallen in the team, who is able to provide very important scientific background. And then, of course, also Frank's former Creaholic teammate, Tiziano Sabbioni, who is our colleague for the technical implementation of them, especially of the assessment. And we are right now at the stage that we are more or less done with our what we call beta version, and this beta version will soon be validated in a pilot, and we want to find out whether we are really on the right track with our AI MBT.
Great. Yeah, we're coming to this later, to the question how we can be a part of this beta version. But coming back to the father of this idea, to Frank, so we could hear that it's so important to understand where you are in this journey in AI in your corporate. So for the toolbox themselves, what's the purpose of the toolbox? how it works and what's the goal for the company to use such toolbox.
Yes, hello everyone. Can you hear me? So,
yes.
Perfect. So yes, I think the first panel was already a great discussion about the topic, how you bring really AI alive in a company. And I think what we all have experienced in the last year is that AI as a technology is very much different from how we are used to developing and scaling ICT solutions, ICT methodologies in companies. So I think we cannot just simply create an AI initiative, a program, a roadmap as we have been used to run a standard ICT initiative. And I think this has been greatly covered as well by the WEF in Davos in the beginning of the year when they published a guide for BOD members how to really pay special attention to the rollout of AI initiatives. On the other hand, I think there is a lot of know-how available how we do change. And this is as well one of my observations from last year. So when the idea came to my mind, so how can we combine the collective know-how that we have about how to run change initiatives and how to apply this on this special kind of new technology or solution that we call AI, or where we use many other acronyms. So we thought, of course, it's only possible really to really roll out something like this if you really create a change that is attractive for all the participants and that creates value at the end of the day. So otherwise, simply, there will only be a few that will follow. And that's where, of course, we think the value of the AI maturity model comes clear. So first of all, I think it's important really to drive the understanding of the topic of AI and its impact on your business, because AI will be one of the biggest changes in the way we work that we have seen in the last maybe 50 years. Secondly, I think it's very much important to evaluate the AI maturity of your own company, because only if you know where you are able to direct the investments that have to come with AI. Second, of course, it's very important to identify profitable use cases, because only these use cases will lead into success stories, and these success stories create energy in the organization and will help you drive this program. And then, of course, if you have a good start and you have good early use cases, then of course you would like to scale this up. But then again, you would like to know, okay, what are the most important scalars for AI in a company? And this is where we, of course, would like to not just use guesswork, but really those scalars that are scientifically proven. And then, of course, very simple map and track your individual roadmap. So these are the elements that we have formulated in the value proposition of the AI maturity and business model toolbox. Yes, and now if we go a little bit more into detail of this, we can maybe start to explain to you a little bit the different elements, and then Maya can maybe start with the first element.
Yes, if you could maybe switch the slide. Yeah, so this slide basically shows all the 5 elements that we put together in a very high level picture. We have first the module understand, which helps you to basically understand what AI is and which added value it could bring to your companies. We will illustrate that module based on concrete use cases and show you basically how other companies were successfully implementing AI for their own companies. The second module then is the assessment module. The original, no, actually this was then still added in the second workshop. the assessment helps you to basically understand in 5 different categories where your own company is currently standing. The third module then is a canvas. I will later emphasize on that a bit. It will help you to create your business model or to elaborate the business value you could generate with AI within your company. The fourth module basically is the original definition of fields of action that Frank originally created 1 year ago. So this is basically the core of the whole module, where all the knowledge and all the basics come together. And the fifth element basically is just a map which helps you to prioritize your next actions. So I guess Tiziano, you would be able to maybe a bit more tell about module 2, because you will also be the one who is going to implement it in a technology that Creaholic built, right?
Yes, thank you, Maya. Yeah, I think Frank and Maya already explained pretty well what our goal is, and also what at least I believe is sooner or later the goal of every company. So to really generate that business value with AI. And the big question there, as Maya already said, is where does my company stand in this process or in this journey that we see? And how can we bring it to the next level? And that's why we at Creaholic developed an innovative assessment tool, which is called Pulse. And I think the big advantage of Pulse is that managers can not only measure the progress of their company's AI maturity, but that they can also ensure that teams across the whole organization can adopt an AI mindset, and that they can continuously then adopt their way of working to the new circumstances. And I think that's really also key to the whole model. And with the help of Benjamin and the HSG, we can develop and validate a scientific question set, which helps company to easily monitor their journey towards an AI-driven company. Yeah, and the next step, as Maya already said, after the assessment then is really about concrete steps that you can make, and also concrete examples. And I don't know, Maya, if you want to elaborate a little bit more on that also.
Yeah, well, module 3 is actually based on a very well-known canvas. It's the Lean canvas invented by Ash Maurya. And we just supplemented this existing canvas with 2 new AI relevant quadrants, which are also based on module 2 especially. So we will use the same categories of assessment also in the third module, in the business canvas. And as easy as I can sketch a new business ID using the Lean canvas, the user of this canvas is able to develop possible areas of application for AI within his company and check them for feasibility based on the assessment he had just done in module 2. And maybe Frank, I guess you were the best to emphasize a bit more on module 4 then.
Yes, thank you, Maya. So module 4 is something that really well helps you to find your way to realize the vision you see for your company. So if you are on this journey and you would like to really create this roadmap to the future, then of course it's very difficult if you have to start on a blank page and cannot leverage all the know-how that is already existing. So module 4 is structured in 4 different maturity levels and 5 different categories, and really gives you a complete overview on what could be very good next step with regard to your position and the assessment. So it really helps you to, well, get the best practice, get scientifically proven practice, and then map your own company against it and see, okay, is this the next best step for me? And I think the important thing is here as well with regard to successful implementation, not to really, well, take a very big step in the beginning, and then you might, yeah, run into a big problem, but really take the very best next step and to improve and learn and make sure by this that you really make up your way to your vision in a very, well, let's say easy and well, rewarding way.
Thanks a lot, Frank. I think it's so important to see all the models, how they come together. In the last year, you really worked hard to establish this maturity model and business model. I see there are good potential for corporates. But now, Benjamin, to a question to you, how this work, actually real work with an organization, how can you combine this with roles, with the problems that they have, with the phase of strategy, with the question that they have? How can you use this toolbox to your best?
Thank you very much. Well, as most of you probably know, that there are a lot of frameworks, tools, and models for maturity out there. I've seen that already in comments here. Sounds like a capability maturity model. And many organizations have used such maturity models and toolboxes to use technology productively and professionally. And it's particularly relevant when introducing new technologies. First of all, it's really important to recognize that there might be a lack of clarity, a lack of vision on how to use them. There is most likely not always a common understanding of what a technology means, what it can do. And many organizations simply struggle on how to make use of it and start with it. And that's, of course, also the case with artificial intelligence. And you can see that with a lot of requests for research, a lot of government spending, companies spending, and also a high demand for guidance and structure in that whole area. So looking back a little bit into maturity models, at the heavy end, we have these large, powerful reference models like ITIL for IT service management, or COBIT for IT governance, the CMMAI for assessing process maturity in organizations. These are really heavyweight fighters in the organizational development arena. And at the lighter end, you have the increasingly popular methods on tools like the business model canvas or the lean startup methodology and so on. And these models work very well because they are rooted, they are simple to use, and they are rooted in empirical evidence. And this is helpful for organizations in implementing them and to use those tools. So by history, we know that maturity models work well and are a proven way forward. And with the AI maturity and business modeling toolbox, we can help organizations because the toolbox and the framework is rooted in practices, in real empirical cases. And it's a holistic and systematic approach that reflects the real world organizational complexity that most of you are most likely experiencing every day. The multiple topics that you've mentioned, Andy, that you need to keep under one roof, you need to bring them somehow together into a coherent picture to make sure that you address the right components and the right processes. And at the same time, having such a nice and large framework is of little use if people don't understand it. And therefore, it's important, to break it down into smaller, manageable pieces and tools. And this is basically what we do with use case identification and identifying use case in the organization, while at the same time thinking about how you can concurrently develop your organization in a productive direction, so that you can operate AI in a reliable and sustainable and also valuable way.
So Benjamin, we saw now there is a toolbox for maturity of AI. There is the first draft. There is lots of good concept behind. So what's your call now? What would you like to achieve in the next step with this maturity model? This should be also more mature over the time, I guess. So please tell us what's your call here for the audiences.
Speaking to me?
Yeah.
Yep. I would hope to work with organizations that have the drive and to take the opportunity seriously, to engage with us, to exchange with us, and to use the team and the effort that the team is putting into it as a platform to facilitate organizational learning and exchange. And with regard to the process, you don't really need to worry about it. There's a whole team behind it that is structuring many of the ideas and practices that are working well. And it's really important that we also share the stuff that's not working very well. And we take care of putting this all together for you. So we're calling for your engagement and for your interaction with us in a pilot and also as a long-term research partner.
So is there someone would like to add something to the end here to this call for action? Frank, maybe?
Yes, sure. I think this is the right time to really pronounce and come back again to what Maya said in the beginning. So we would like to move on now into a pilot phase. We have created the beta version of the AI maturity and business model toolbox, and we have now really a strong urge within the team really to validate this with members from Swiss Cognitive. So we offer you to participate in this pilot. So for you, of course, as a benefit, as a participant, you will have a first-hand view on the model and profit already from the collected know-how that we have. So I really would like to invite you to participate. And how it will work, I will hand over now to Maya, who can tell you how this is going to be set up.
Yeah, thank you, Frank. It's actually quite easy. We have set up Google form, which you can find. Maybe you can show the slide again, Andy, because the URL is on the form. There is a Google form which allows you to fill your data and apply for the pilot. We are looking for, on one hand, many companies to spend their time and help us to validate the pilot, to use it, to enter data, provide honest feedback as well. And we will also select a couple of companies among those who are applying now and do the assessment with them in a joint way and help them to understand the whole toolbox. But we will not be able to do that with every company who is applying. So if you apply, we are really grateful if you just put your data into our form, and we will then get back to you within the next weeks to make sure that everybody receives the feedback. We hope that you can enter your data within, let's say, next 7 to 10 days, so we have a complete view on the applicants and then can move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maya. Yeah, great to have this possibility. So meet them in the backstage, meet them in the one-to-ones, or here on this bit.ly link to be a part of this AI maturity business models toolbox. Sorry. So great. Thanks, Maya, Frank, Benjamin, and Tiziano, and see you soon. So I will hand over to Dalit now.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. It was very interesting. And this is one of the things that Swiss Cognitive tries to support and empower. If we have great ideas that we can share, that enables all of us and empowers all of us to get the next steps done. So this is what we're trying to support. Now we're getting to our last speaker, to Tom from the US. Thanks for having you with us. Thomas Campbell is a recognized analyst and researcher in emerging and disruptive technologies. He's the founder and CEO of Future Grasps, an advisory group that works with organizations globally to identify business opportunities from cognitive technologies. From 2015 to 2017, Tom was the first National Intelligence Officer for Technology with the National Intelligence Council in the United States Office of Director of National Intelligence. His career encompasses national and international experience in government, academia, industry, startups, and national laboratories. He is a senior fellow with the Council of Competitiveness and a special advisor to Bootstraps Labs. And we at Swiss Cognitive are proud and honored to be a partner and supporting your great job. Tom, the stage.
Thank you, Dallas. I'm trying to get my slides to be shared here. So can you see this? Oh, there they come. Okay. Okay, great. So thank you, Dallas. It's my pleasure to speak in such a distinguished forum. I would like to talk to you today about a topic that I believe could be an expanded or an even new market sector for AI. That is to say, applications of AI in the world of diplomacy. And in diplomacy, I consider that both in the context of the diplomatic state affairs, so international countries, as well as the business professionals. This work is based upon an earlier blog post the FutureGrasp team in collaboration with Virginia Tech published recently, and that blog post is available on the FutureGrasp website. So next slide, please. So diplomacy has long been affected by technology, especially information and communications technology. So ever since the early days of telegraphy, I believe, well, there we go. It's waiting for the slide to transition. A little bit of delay from the United States here, so apologies. So ever since the early days of telegraphy, in which messages could be sent in mere minutes across oceans, diplomats have been forced to confront the ICT's effects upon their operations. When the internet spread rapidly in the 1980s and 1990s, that dependence reached new heights. Social media itself is now fully leveraged within diplomatic spheres, with many US government and foreign agencies, as well as companies, having their own Twitter handles and LinkedIn pages to promote their specific messages. But like everyone else, when the coronavirus hit, next slide, when the coronavirus pandemic hit, all this ICT dependence reached its apex. Suddenly, all diplomatic travel ceased, and most of us were forced to work remotely. This engendered a new, previously unseen set of challenges for diplomats and business people. For example, the challenges included, first off, lack of face-to-face interactions and difficulty in reading body language in general. The diplomats in the international spheres, for example, are very dependent upon the very intimate discussions that they have in conferences, in the hotels, in restaurants, and so forth. And it is a challenge to execute this over the web, as we've seen many times already in the last few months. IT challenges, such as delays in signals, like in my slides, or in just lost signal entirely. I've seen that several times in webinars, for example. Informal discussions themselves can be obviated or are obviated totally. We have our chat rooms and so forth, but it only works so well compared to the face-to-face. Collaborative writing, such as treaties, are much more difficult to execute. There's been many hundreds, thousands of postponed or canceled meetings. And then we have issues such as cybersecurity, Zoom bombing, Zoom snooping, and so forth, and that's a rather critical issue that still needs to be fully addressed among some web platforms, at least. Next slide. So in the context of AI for better diplomacy, what can we possibly offer the diplomacy community, both, again, from a state diplomat perspective, as well as what is in the business world? So there's two approaches I would suggest from FutureGrasp perspective, and clearly there's many more options possibly here in this context, but look at these two. From the tactical or short term, AI could enable things such as taskmasters to schedule new meetings and send short follow-up emails to participants dynamically. So if I say I want to have a meeting during my Zoom or other webinar meeting, it will automatically do that for me. Information access, beyond just I want to look up this random factoid, but seek additional and provide information upon request dynamically during a meeting. Predictive analytics is a relatively nascent field, but there's been tremendous promise in it. We can leverage deep learning of social media and news to predict events actually with AI. That's been proven by my colleagues at Virginia Tech as well as other places. Social media can forecast 7 to 10 business days out what might happen in terms of protests and other things. Fact checking, you hear quite a lot about in the political scene, confirming statements as true or false via a probability score. Meeting summarization, to provide a meeting summarization with all action items and responsible parties noted immediately upon the end of a call. I myself would love to have that capability when you have a long webinar. Can you have a quick summary done by automation, obviously checked by a human later on, but that would be very useful to at least get action items and executables coming out of a meeting. And lastly, of course, cybersecurity assurance, in which we track hackers and intruders and alert the participants of any violations. These are all super important spaces. From a strategic perspective, there are things that are still in the wings, but could be leveraged in webinars and other types of online meetings. Emotions analysis, I think, is something that hasn't been deployed yet, to my knowledge, but there is a capability, especially when you're doing negotiations or other things. If you would be able to assess the emotions of the person you're talking to, you could say, extract information from those emotions, such as stress levels, and dynamically display the emotional states of meeting participants to the benefit of yourself and potentially also the person you're speaking with. Digital doubles also could be programmed with identical likeness, personality quirks, voices, etc., to an actual human, and thus enable additional capabilities beyond the original person. I know there was some mention of digital twins earlier in this webinar, and I would applaud that effort. It is going the way it is. We're more and more into the online community now, and I don't see this abating in any way, shape, or form. So Future Grasp in general seeks partners and investors in this area to assist in these issues, and such work could go beyond state diplomacy also, as I mentioned, since the solutions developed here would have important implications to business operations also. I'd like to acknowledge my great colleagues within Future Grasp, as well as the entire, the team within Virginia Tech. On the next slide, show the instance here of the folks that developed this team. And lastly, I'd be happy to have further conversations in the backstage session immediately following this session. So I turn it back over to you, Dalith, and hopefully this has been of some utility for your audience. And I am honestly, personally, super excited about this space because I engage with the United Nations. I work with other IGOs around the world, Swiss Cognitive and all the great people in Switzerland. And there is great potential to go beyond what we have in this very limited sort of two-dimensional world right now, to take it to another level with applied artificial intelligence. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Tom. It was a really great last keynote. And it shows us that once again, there are so many topics, areas, industries where we can do something with cognitive technology, where we can support and where we can empower and give a huge benefit at the end of the day for the humankind. One of the things, a very small one, but what I would really love to, because this is actually a tough work, is what you mentioned, getting some takeaways, action items, and insights from any kind of conferences, meetings, wherever. So this will be definitely a huge help also for me personally. So saying that, I would like first and foremost, thank you all to our speakers, our contributors, and our partners, our co-host, EPAM System, who supported us very, very strong also in the moderation. Now, the wrap-up of this conference, you will get, as always, in an email, and we will share with you also the handouts that are being handed in before. So I don't want to lose too much time on that. But what I would really like to emphasize again, and really ask everyone out there to support the community and to bring everyone to get the trust into technology, to discuss how we can benefit, especially now in these very special days of the crisis. We have seen so many great possibilities and opportunities, how cognitive technology can support us. And we had some discussion today about, yes, there are tasks being redundant for the human being. On the other hand, it gives us the possibility to do what we are good in, to invest time and money where the human being is needed. So one thing that I would like to also share with you is, and I think it was Simon saying that, the domain knowledge. I really like that, what you said, that everyone should focus on his domain knowledge, whether it's the business or the techies, and together we can make it run. And as you saw on this virtual conference today, we really tried to bring both sides together on stage to explain their experience, to talk about best practice and also worst failures. Having our next virtual conference, July 8th, there is a call for speakers, for companies. Share with us if you want to share with the audience. Reach out to us, and we will be more than happy to discuss the possibility to be on stage with Swiss Cognitive. So thanks a lot to all the audience out there around the globe. We're nearly about 80 countries with nearly thousands of attendees. We will share with you the numbers. Remain healthy and see you soon with Swiss Cognitive on stage. Bye, and enjoy a great evening or morning in New Zealand. Bye.